The House will please come to order. Good morning, members. Welcome to the 27th day of the 66th Wyoming Legislature, Friday, March 26, 2021. Please call the roll.
Convening roll, 27th day, Friday, March 26th, 2021. Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly.
Here.
Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flittner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Worf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Swanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Larson Lloyd. Roscoe. Excused. 59 present, 1 excused.
Thank you very much. Members, if you'll join Reverend Veit from St. Mark's Episcopal Church for our prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I would like to offer you a prayer for self-dedication, and I've chosen to preserve much of the Old English, so bear with me. Let us pray. O Lord our God, you have brought us in safety to this new day. So draw our hearts to thee, so guide our minds, so fill our imaginations, so inspire our wills, that we may be wholly thine, utterly dedicated unto thee, and then use us, we pray thee, as thou wilt, and always to thy glory and the welfare of thy people, especially those here in Wyoming, through our one and our holy Lord. Amen. Amen.
Thank you very much, Reverend Veit, for being with us this week. So if you'd go down, let's go down the north hallway this time. Go down the north hallway and they'll give you a send off and thank you very much for your service this week. No, just right on the floor. Thank you very much again, Reverend Veit. We do appreciate it. Representative Simpson, a privilege of the floor. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I was privileged to grow up in a small town in western Wyoming. The name of the town was Thane. It's about 50 miles south of Jackson Hole. I went away to seek my fortune and eventually came back. But my brother, I grew up at the local feed store. That's what my dad's business was. And my brother took over the business and he raised his family there. And he has a son that went away, became a doctor, and returned back to his hometown to practice. And moreover, he decided to run for the mayorship to give back to his community. And he is visiting with us today. Would you welcome my nephew, Mayor Devin Simpson?
Well, welcome to the House, Mayor Simpson, and you've got a quite an accomplished uncle here doing work with us, so we appreciate you being here. Chairman Harshman, you have a privilege. Go ahead, please.
Please, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's not often we have folks come down from Casper. You know, number one on our license plates, number one in all our hearts. And a constituent of mine in House District 37, he's the leader and president of the Career Technical Educators of Wyoming, out there getting our kids to work, Mr. Rob Hill. Welcome to the House.
Welcome to the House, Mr. Hill. Glad you're with us today. Any other privileges? Any other privileges? Journal Committee report.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of March 25th, 2021 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Representatives Provenza and Haroldson.
Well, we're at that order of business of Senate files on first reading. The first Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 121.
Senate File 121, sponsored by Senator Perkins.
First reading of the bill.
State funds, investments, and distributions.
Senate File 121 is referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Next Senate File 127.
Senate File 127, sponsored by Senator Kinski.
First reading of the bill.
Wyoming Learn While You Earn program.
Senate File 127 is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. Next Senate File for consideration, Senate File 28.
Senate File 28, sponsored by corporations.
First reading of the bill.
Motor vehicles, security interest perfection.
Senate File 28 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Next Senate File 112.
Senate File 112, sponsored by Senator Landon.
First reading of the bill.
Insurance discount for accident prevention training.
Senate File 112 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. We're now in that order of business of bills on second reading. Follow your script. Follow your script. Standing committee reports.
Mr. Speaker, Your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom was referred Senate File 122 engrossed, Wyoming Agriculture Authority, respectfully reports same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Clausen, Eklund, Western, Wharf, Winter. Noes, Representatives Blackburn, Fortner, Heiner, Lorson Dan. Representative Eklund, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom was referred Senate File 139, Community-Based In-Home Services Program, respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Kenner, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Excused, Representative Larson Lloyd. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
Thank you, Reading Clerk, Deputy Chief Clerk. We're now at that order of business of bills on second reading. First Senate file for our consideration, Senate File 2.
Senate File 2, sponsored by School Facilities. School Facilities Project Prioritization and Act relating to K-12 school facilities.
Senate File 2 have been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 39.
Senate File 39, sponsored by Blockchain, Digital Identity, and Act relating to Trade and Commerce.
Senate File 39 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 40.
Senate File 40, sponsored by Minerals, Wyoming Money Transmitters Act amendments, and Act relating to Trade and Commerce.
Senate File 40 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 44.
Senate File 44, sponsored by Minerals, Solid Waste Cease and Transfer Program Funding, an act relating to the prioritization of municipal solid waste facilities, cease and transfer projects.
Senate File 44 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 47.
Senate File 47, sponsored by Senator Case, Clinical Laboratory Regulation, an act relating to professions and occupations.
Senate File 47 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 50.
Senate File 50, sponsored by Agriculture, COVID-19 Business Relief Programs, Agriculture, an act relating to emergency expenses of government related to business relief.
Senate File 50 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 52.
Senate File 52, sponsored by Labor, Insurance, Mental Health and Substance Use Parity, an act relating to insurance.
Senate File 52 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 56.
Senate File 56, sponsored by Travel, Wyoming Gaming Commission, Modifications and Corrections.
We do have amendments. I just don't have a copy of them. Representative Walters, second reading amendment number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 56 and ask for your favorable consideration. And members, what this is we had a standing committee amendment yesterday that included that would have put in truck stops and places with liquor licenses. But in that amendment, it also included several other corrections that were important. It was difficult to divide that amendment. So what I've done here is take out the truck stops and liquor stores or liquor licenses, excuse me, but done what I would call the more technical side of the amendments. And so that's what this does. And on page 8, about midway down in the amendment, we discussed changing guilt. You have to plead guilty within the last 10 years. So something that occurred when you were 20 years old, now you're a 60-year-old businessman or woman, wouldn't affect you. Deleting the word crime on page 9 and inserting felony. Again, on page 9, and this is line 24, we're going to say that items that would negatively impact the applicant's credibility or security, integrity, or fairness of play of skill-based amusement games operated by the applicant. And so it really says the issues that you got in trouble for have to be related to or have an impact on those sorts of games. So like I said, I'd consider these more improvements to the bill, and they were part of that large standing committee amendment yesterday but it would have been too difficult to divide out everything. And so that's what I'm bringing to you today, and would gladly entertain any questions. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'd ask for your favorable consideration.
Thank you, members, for their first time. Representative Washut for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Speaker. My question has to do with the crime and felony change. As I read the language in the bill, any property crime would be considered, but this is in the section dealing with violent crime. And now it has to be a felony violent crime. Am I correct on that, or would I miss something in the translation? I just don't understand why a misdemeanor property crime would count, but a misdemeanor crime of violence wouldn't.
Any other member for their first time? We're on first time, second reading amendment number 1. First time, seeing none. First time, Representative Yin, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker. So I guess my question is, were there any, did the commission come forward saying that there were crimes that they wanted to put in rules that the committee at the time, when they put it in the standing committee amendment, said that, you know, I don't think this is related to skill-based amusement games, so maybe we shouldn't have the commission have this power to add this crime as something that they shouldn't give a permit to. So that's my question. Where did the language come from that brought the need to have this added to the statute? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other members for their first time? First time, seeing none. Second time to the sponsor, Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This language came really from a good member on the committee that is related to this bill that works down the hall. And as they inserted this down the hall, the intent was to make sure that we captured what was necessary. And by moving it from a crime, it takes it so that you're not just doing anything, but you had to rise to the level of a felony as opposed to any crime, because these are automatic reasons for denial of these applications. And so that was kind of the direction and the intent of the amendment, was knowing that this was an automatic denial, that it needed to be raised to a fairly high level versus just any crime out there. And so that was the discussion. And like I said, it was really drafted by a good member and colleague from down the hall that came up with this concept. And with that, I'd call for the question.
Thank you, members. We are voting on second reading amendment number 1, Senate File 56. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. We have an additional amendment, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill or Senate File 56 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, what this does is it takes the 20% current tax and it increases it to 25%. So I want to step back just to the conversation we've had previously about this. And first, I just want to make sure that I apologize to the body and make sure that everyone's aware that my criticism of bodies past is nothing, casting judgment on this body. I guess more for me, I just want to step back to 2013 in House Bill 25, which is when simulcasting was really became available in this state. And it's, it may be shocking to some, but there's only 14 members still currently in this body that voted on that bill. 10 people voted aye, 4 voted no. I was one of the people that voted aye. So I can't speak for everybody that they didn't have a full understanding of what they were voting on and the full implications, but I can speak for myself that I don't feel that I fully understood what was brought forward. And then I'll just add that, after that, I went to one of our organizations that we pay dues to that includes other states and spoke with them. And really, I found out that other states experienced the same thing, that this was a concerted effort, coordinated effort that got these machines legal without really legislators fully understanding what was going on. And multiple state legislators went back the following year and tried to repeal what they had done. So when we talk about camel under the tent and some of this stuff and conversations, I just want us all to be aware that, really, it doesn't really matter what we decide on this. We're going to be coming back and we're going to revisit this issue. And the people that sit in the seats after us, we'll continue to revisit this issue. So it's going to be complicated, and I appreciate your consideration. As far as the amendment is concerned, I do think it's the right thing to do. As you'll see, the sponsors of the amendment it's bipartisan, 2 members of Revenue Committee looking to solve problems that we have. So on and for the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Any members, and members, just so you know, the good Representative Baker did come to me and I said I was going to give him some leeway with responding or commenting on his comments from the other day. So while that may have been off the amendment a little bit, he had informed me he was going to do that, and I basically gave him a personal privilege to do that. So Representative Newsom first. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against this amendment and for the bill, the reason it is 20% is because when we originally drafted the legislation a year ago, it was to give parity with historic horse racing. So the 20% is parity with what historic horse racing pays for the good of the state. So on and opposed to the amendment.
And there's not a 100-mile limitation, I see. Representative Yen, first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. On and for the amendment. We all know that we have revenue concerns. And I think this is one of the more interesting ways of generating revenue where we're not expanding, and we're also setting the limit on how much customers can spend. So that's good. So I'm for this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Sweeney, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment. And folks, we're talking about skilled games. That's what this amendment is after, not simulcast. This only affects, in this language, skill-based games. So that 5% increase translates to a 25% increase in tax just in 1 year of operation, which without this legislation, they'll be illegal again. So on and against the amendment.
Thank you. Chairman Flitner, first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. On and against, we specifically asked the commission that oversees if this percentage would be adequate, and they said that it would. So on and against.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? First time. Representative Walters, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment. If we really want to discuss this from a revenue perspective, the best way to create revenue is by allowing the small amount of expansion we discussed yesterday. And that was understandably so, that was not moved forward. But by increasing the rate of the tax, as we see in all other taxes, doesn't necessarily increase revenue. And what this does is potentially decrease revenue and still have the same number of games out there operating. And so this has been a good revenue stream for the locals. It's been a good revenue stream for the school foundation program account. And we've hit the sweet spot. And we're in parity, as was discussed earlier, with the historic horse racing. And so again, on and against the amendment. And if you're really serious about revenue, I think we should discuss a slight amount of expansion. But I recognize that's a concern we don't want to broach at this point. And so I would just be on and against the amendment.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? First time. First time, second time? Any member for a second time? Second time before the sponsor, to the sponsor, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the body and appreciate the discussion and the privilege. Just a few couple comments just to kind of wrap it up here. If you look at the distribution of this and what it affects, we've been getting emails from our cities. We've been getting emails from our counties. We've been getting emails, from the school looking for new sources of revenue. This is a revenue that actually seems to be COVID proof. You got a lot of emails from these industries saying, hey, without this, our business would have failed. So if this is COVID proof, it seems like a pretty stable source of revenue. I think we should go ahead and capitalize on this. As far as the historic racing comments, if this bill included historic racings, I would have brought an amendment to increase that too. So, let's divide the discussion, stay on topic. This is about the skills-based games. So on and for the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we are voting on second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 56. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is not adopted. Senate File 56, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 58.
Senate File 58, sponsored by Education. Wyoming Investment in Nursing Funding, an act relating to administration of government.
Senate File 58, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 62.
Senate File 62, sponsored by Management and Audit. Repealing sunset date for the Office of Consumer Advocate, an act relating to the Office of the Consumer Advocate.
Senate File 62, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 72.
Senate File 72, sponsored by Appropriations, Financial Counsel and Reporting Budget Reductions, an act relating to the administration of government.
Senate File 72, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 79.
Senate File 79, sponsored by Appropriations, Medicaid Billing for School-Based Services, an act relating to school finance.
Senate File 79, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 88.
Senate File 88, sponsored by Senator Cost, Ownership of Fossils and Artifacts, an act relating to property and conveyances.
We do have an amendment. Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill or Senate File 88, and to ask for your favorable consideration. And I'll kind of lay out what's going on. Yesterday, the Committee of the Whole amendment took out artifacts from the terms in this bill. And as I looked at that and started considering that, I had some contacts from people in my district, and they said an artifact is an object made by a human being, typically an item of cultural or historical interest. And so what this translates out to is, let's say that you were down by the old wash on your property and you found the old rifle half sticking out of the bank. With how this bill was originally written, that would be the owner of that property's possession because he found it on his property. But if we take artifact out, it creates a gray area of who owns an artifact found on private property. The concern originally for this came from the tribes in the state, and they're concerned about items of interest to those entities being basically damaged or removed. And so this is something I think we're going to have to deal with and take up in an interim time. But when we place artifact, when we remove that out, we are covering in a very blanketed statement everything that is left by a human being throughout history. And so if that's the old trap down by the creek that's pounded into the ground, that is then in a gray area because it's piercing through, or it's in the substructure of the ground. And so I think at this point, we need to put artifact back in, and we need to have a discussion in the interim and bring a bill that will protect those items that are a concern or of interest. But at this point, we need to be careful, because if we're not careful, we're bringing into question again ownership on private property of any artifact left throughout history. So with that, I'd take questions.
Thank you. Representative Clifford, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against this amendment. And I want to appreciate my colleague from District 4. He did come and apprise me of his concern. But the tribes and the people I represent had valid concerns as well. And I would just urge the body that this needs a robust conversation. Both tribes need to be at the table. In this amendment, the artifact, I would argue that it's being loosely compared to the Antiquities Act, to NAGPRA, what stands for Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. And so there's just a concern I hear his concern, but we also have some concerns too, as far as the statute 7-4-106, which is its existing state statute. And there's just a lot of concerns with this. And I just think we need to have those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Hunt for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment and for the bill. Excuse me, and I appreciate the concerns of the good bringer of the amendment and what he's trying to do here, but I think that this bill has been well thought out, and I think that if there needs to be an interim discussion by the committee concerning Native American artifacts, then that might be something worth talking about. But I frankly think that the amendment here is a little too broad, and I think that the bill as written is fine, and that the amendment that was brought by the committee was just made it better. And so I think that we need to again, if we need to have a further discussion about working with the tribes and their considerations and thoughts on how Native American artifacts are handled, that should be done. Currently, as my understanding is what we heard in committee, that if you have private property and you're out on your land and you find an arrowhead or you find a scraper or other artifacts of that nature, those are your private property because it's on the surface. But anyway, like I say, I think that it warrants further discussion if needed beyond the scope of this bill or beyond the scope of this amendment this morning. So on and against. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Blackburn, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did a little research, just a little, and there's actually 4 types of artifacts: historical and cultural, which are historic and cultural items such as historic relic or works of art; media, such as film, photos, digital files that are valued for their creative and information content. Knowledge is actually an artifact, which I was surprised to see that, and data. Also, I do believe there's some laws out there that do protect our Native brothers and sisters. We probably also can work this bill during the interim and put artifacts back in it until then. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members first time? Representative Clausen, Vice Chair Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment. So this becomes at least a concern when we start talking about permitting and that sort of thing down the road. If you make it clear that this becomes this is a surface owner item and the whole bill in general. This issue came from Montana, and I've been involved in it a little bit, but it just provides clarity when you're doing permitting, and especially for federal permitting. And on and for the amendment.
Thank you. Any other members for their first time? We're on first time, second reading amendment number 1, Senate File 88. First time, second time. Second time to the sponsor, Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So just a couple things to clarify. This is just returning it back to how it was written. We're not adding anything. We're just bringing it back to how it was originally brought before the committee of the whole amendment. And in here, it says in 7-4-106, I've brought that up, and in subsection B, it states that the state archaeologist determines that the remains, if someone were to find human remains that they're Native American, the state archaeologist shall notify the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho tribes. And then it goes on and it talks about that you're not allowed to touch, you have to contact the coroner, and you have to move through an entire process that they have very well laid out. And that any, if you were to find a burial ground of some sorts, that you are to leave obviously any human remains, or you're to remain any funeral objects that is part of the death ritual or ceremony of a culture. So there is protection for these items in this situation. And ultimately what we want to do is we want to protect if there were to be something found and someone were to say, well, I want to take and I want to bring a suit against, or I want to try to seize that. If this is taken out of here, we take away the rights of the landowner to protect that find on their property, which I think is definitely something we need to be very careful about. So I would ask that you would vote yes on the amendment and obviously on the bill. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Members, we are voting on second reading amendment number 1, Senate File 88. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is not adopted. Senate File 88, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 93.
Senate File 93, sponsored by Appropriations, the WICHE Repayment Program, Veterinary Medicine Students, an act relating to the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, WICHE Repayment Program.
Senate File 93, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 119.
Senate File 119, sponsored by Appropriations, Investment of State Permanent Funds, an act relating to public funds.
Senate File 119, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next, Senate File 120.
Senate File 120, sponsored by Appropriations, Investment of State Non-Permanent Funds, an act relating to public funds.
Senate File 120, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, I don't have an amendment. My apologies, Chairman. We do have an amendment. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a technical correction. What it does is it makes the language conform with Senate File 119 as well. So I'd ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Discussion on the amendment, seeing none. Members, you are voting on second reading amendment number 1, Senate File 120. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Senate File 120 have been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Rule 7-3, I would like to lay back Senate File 25 1 day.
Without objection, Senate File 25 is laid back 1 day. Members, as an amendment was being prepared for that, so that's why it's being laid back and it got complex, I'm assuming. So, Mr. Majority Floor Leader, you have a motion for the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I would move the consent list for third reading consisting of the following bills: Senate Files 13, 21, 23, 30, 35, and 36.
Would any member like any of the bills on consent removed from the consent list? Any bills from the consent list removed?
You're not going to do it?
Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to remove Senate File 36 from the consent list. Thank you.
Senate File 36 is removed from the consent list. Any other bills from the consent list? Any other bills from the consent list?
36.
Yep, just take a moment to adjust our consent list roll call. And I guess reading clerk, you want to read the bills on consent list? Yep.
Senate File 13, sponsored by Transportation, Abandoned Vehicles, Towing Service Liens and Titles, an act relating to motor vehicle liens being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 21, sponsored by Judiciary, Judiciary Review of Agency Actions, Permissible Venues, an act relating to administrative procedure being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 23, sponsored by Judiciary, Public Meeting, Executive Session for Security Plans, an act relating to public meetings being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 30, sponsored by Corporations, Pandemic Response Review Task Force, an act relating to public health being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 35, sponsored by Appropriations, State Budget Department, an act relating to the administration of government, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Having been read three separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Roll call on the consent. Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly.
Aye.
Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Aye. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. 60 aye. As for Senate File 13, are there any changes? Larson Dan, aye to no. Baker, aye to no. Jennings, aye to no. Fortner, aye to no. Gray, aye to no. Burt, aye to no. Further changes? Stivar? Further changes? Ottman, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 52 aye, 8 no. As for Senate File 21, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 60 aye. As for Senate File 23, are there any changes? Andrew, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 59 aye, 1 no. As for Senate File 30, are there any changes? Gray, aye to no. Heiner, aye to no. Washit, aye to no. Burt, aye to no. Walters, aye to no. Nyman, aye to no. Andrew, aye to no. Haroldson, aye to no. O'Hearn, aye to no. Blackburn, aye to no. Provenza, aye to no. McGuire, aye to no. Nicholas, aye to no. Obermuller, aye to no. Burkhart, aye to no. Ottman, aye to no. Olson, aye to no. Stivar, aye to no. Crago, aye to no. Stith, aye to no. Baker, aye to no. Jennings, aye to no. Kenner, aye to no. Knapp, aye to no. Williams, aye to no. Greer, aye to no. Winter, aye to no. Schwartz, aye to no. Western, aye to no. Larson Dan, aye to no. Fortner, aye to no. Bear, aye to no. Henderson, aye to no. Oakley, aye to no. Zawanitzer, aye to no. Roscoe, aye to no. Further changes? Provenza, no to I. Correct? No to I. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 25 I, 35 no. And as for Senate File 35, are there any changes? Jennings, I to no. Bear, I to no. Baker, I to no. Stivar, I to no. Fortner, I to no. Winter, I to no. Larson Dan, I to no. Greer, I to no. Knapp, I to no. Wharf, I to no. Williams, I to no. Flitner, I to no. Brown, I to no. Washut, I to no. Heiner, I to no. Gray, I to no. Harshman, I to no. Nyman, I to no. Haroldson, I to no. Blackburn, I to no. Burt, I to no. Zawanitzer, I to no. Ottman, I to no. McGuire, I to no. Crago, I to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 35 I, 25 no.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate Files 13, 21, 23, and 35 have passed the House. Having not received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File number 30 has failed to pass the House.
Thank you.
We'll stand at ease just a moment. We're waiting on an amendment for Senate File 36.
Are they not going to do it? He did not approve it, and he wanted Hunt to approve.
So Representative Gray and Representative Hunt, please come to the dais, please.
Mr. Speaker,
Please proceed, Representative Hunt.
pursuant to House Rule 7.3, I'd request that Senate File 36 be laid back one day.
Thank you. Without objection, it is so laid back one day. So members, there was an amendment requested. You have to authorize, or you have to approve your amendment so that it can come to the chief clerk and come through the process. As you know, any amendment is needs to be reduced to writing to be presented to the body, regardless of what the amendment is. So Senate File 36 is laid back. So we have two Senate files that were laid back, 25 and 36. So we're just going to get a little paperwork in order, and then we're going to begin with our concurrences to Senate amendments to House bills. So Chairman, I hope you'll have your concurrence notices ready. Members, as you will recall, it was announced last night that the amendment or the concurrence notices were sent to you via email by the chief clerk at 4:58 p.m. And there was a correction sent this morning on message 310. Message 310 is with regard to House Bill 121. All right, members, with that order of business of request to concur with Senate amendments to House bills. The first message for our consideration is message 302 on House Bill 49. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll turn the explanation of the concurrence over to the good representative from the far west side of the state.
I think go ahead and move the concurrence report or move the message number 302, current concurrence, and then we can turn it over, please.
Thank you. I would move a non-concurrence on message 302, and I turn the explanation over to the good representative from west side.
Thank you very much. Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So ladies and gentlemen, if you'll turn then to the concurrence request associated with House Bill 49. The beginning of that concurrence request is conforming language. However, when we get down into the verbiage, the paragraphs there, 7-13-407, I'd like to refresh your memory. Remember, this bill was about adjusting fees that hadn't been adjusted for a long time. We covered many different agencies. And remember when we talked about probationers and parolees, the question is, should they contribute a fee to the management of their activities when they're back out on the street? And we had quite a discussion about the fact that those people, those individuals probably was in a poor place to be assigning them fees. Certainly a large majority of them, they've been in prison already. They don't have a steady income. If they have families, it would just be a hardship on them. And so this body approved an amendment that struck these fees from that group of people. So Roman numeral I, 1, 2, and 3, as you glance down through the concurrence request, those were struck. So almost everything in here was in our original bill, and this body chose to remove it to be compassionate to those people and not charge them fees. When it arrived in the other chamber, they literally picked up what we removed and put it right back in the bill. They felt like those individuals should be paying these fees associated with their maintenance and care. And so our recommendation is that we not concur. Let's send it to a conference committee and be able to discuss that. Why did they think that it was appropriate to do that? So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any discussion? Any discussion? The concurrence reports are the same as second or third reading. You get one members for their first time, members for their second time. First time, Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you to the representative who just brought this and recommended that we do not concur. I want to just support that statement. Again, this ends up costing us more money. States that have done this spend more on trying to collect these fines and fees. No to concurrence. Thank you.
Any other member? Any other members? Any other member? So members, the good chairman actually put us in a bit of a quandary. So Chairman Nicholas, would you come back to the mic and withdraw the current motion for non-concurrence and have a motion to concur so that we can be voting ayes and noes instead of the opposite? So please.
So, Mr. Speaker, I would move that we concur on the concurrence for 302. I vote that we not concur. Vote no.
Thank you.
No.
All right. Any other members?
Yeah,
Any
vote-
other
please no-
members?
Vote no on the concurrence. I
So just-
move the concurrence, yeah.
So just to be clear, the first time the motion was made, it was for non-concurrence. So the motion was non-concurrence. So withdrew that. Now we're voting on concurrence. And the request has been to vote no. So if you vote no, it's going to go to conference committee. If you vote aye, then you're saying we like what the Senate did. We like what the Senate did. So members, we're voting on concurrence to message 302 on House Bill 49. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly.
No.
Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. 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 Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Blackburn. Crago. Aye to no, or no to aye. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 4 aye, 56 no.
By your vote, you have voted not to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 49. Next message for your consideration is number 303 on House Bill 54. Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Speaker, I move concurrence on message 303 to House Bill 54 and would ask for your favorable aye vote. The Senate changed a few things. Some of it is cleanup. Some of it, I think, adds clarity to the bill, and nothing really takes away from what we've done on the House side. This is the meat processing plants and the program that is done by the Business Council. And they added some things that I think are just fine and add clarity to the intent of the bill, and I would ask for your aye vote.
Any discussion on message 303, House Bill 54? Any discussion? Any discussion? So members, we are voting to concur. Message 303, House Bill 54. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Clifford, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hunt, Jennings, Kinner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, McGuire, Martinez, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer, Mr. Speaker. Burkhart. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Blackburn, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 53 aye, 7 no.
By your vote, you voted to concur with the Senate amendments to House Bill 54. Next message for our consideration is message 304 on House Bill 57. Chairman Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move concurrence on message number 4 to House Bill 57. The Such Police issued a no ticket to the bringer of the bill. And they found a such an in the bill. The bringer of the bill has no problem with changing that to the, so I'm asking for your aye vote.
Any other discussion on message 304? 304 House Bill 57. Seeing none, members, we are voting to concur with message 304 House Bill 57 on amendments. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Clifford, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hunt, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, McGuire, Martinez, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stibar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 60 aye.
By your vote, you have voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 57. Next message for our consideration is 305 on House Bill 91. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move message number 305 on House Bill 91 and ask you to vote aye. And I will turn over explanation of the concurrence to the good Vice Chairwoman of Minerals.
Vice Chair Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the body, please concur on this. We as realtors, it's our duty to educate the public. So there's no need to mandate it in this section. We're already in statute required to be fiduciaries to the public. And as an industry, we already have to adhere to a code of ethics. So this section that they took out is basically just being a courtesy, an extra layer of protection. And so all we did is we were requiring to put a cover sheet on the document, putting a stamp and stating that this section of the covenants has a violation of the fair housing. And that's all this particular section is in this part of the bill. By taking this out, all it is it's requiring us as realtors to make sure that we inform our clients. We inform the public. We're already mandated to do that by our code of ethics. We're already mandated to do that by statute with our contracts. So the beef and the meat of the bill and the intent of the bill is the actual filing part. That's already still in place in the bill. So this isn't necessary. It was just an extra piece, an extra courtesy. So I encourage you to vote aye. It doesn't take away from the integrity of the bill.
Any discussion on the concurrence? Any discussion? Further discussion? Seeing none. Members, we are voting on a motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 91, message 305. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Clifford, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hunt, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, McGuire, Martinez, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stibar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 60 aye.
By your vote, you voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 91. Next message for our consideration, 306, Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll move Senate message number 306, concurrence request for House Bill 07. I'm going to ask for a no vote, not to concur, Mr. Speaker, members. Let me tell you the reason why. You recall the history on this, where we were working on this air ambulance service and trying a few things to work through Medicaid for a higher reimbursement. When this came through last year, it came through the first time in the last year, it basically prohibited these air ambulance membership services from existing and had them become regulated as a full disability insurer. So the threshold, one, it isn't what they do. And two, the threshold was so high that the people that had been operating in the state of Wyoming couldn't. So what we looked at through the interim and worked on and what we came up with was what we have referred to in this as regulation light. The bill that came out of the House of Representatives basically had the filing notice, minimal regulations for these services, for these providers, and some consumer protection. And that's what we did. This came out of the House in that vein. It was a good way to work this forward, good compromise. When it went to the other chamber, they started inserting a bunch more strings and the ability of the insurance commissioner to go in and audit the books and do all of this stuff in a tremendous amount more power. That's not what was intended. That's not what was discussed throughout the interim. I've actually had quite a few requests that we need to get back and correct this and get this back to the proper amount of regulation for that. So with that, I'd ask your indulgence, vote no on concurrence, and we'll get down there and work with them. They're ready to work with us on it. So thank you.
Thank you. Any of those other members want to speak on the notice? Any other members? So members, we are voting on motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 7. The majority of the members elected is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly.
No.
Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Stith, I to know. Brown, I to know. Andrew, I to know. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 3 aye, 57 no.
By your vote, you have voted not to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 7. Next message for our consideration. Message 307 to House Bill 58, Chairman Flitner.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I move concurrence on message number 307 to House Bill 58, and I would ask for your aye vote. If you will remember, this bill had to do with additional expending authority for the agency that oversees our state parks. Our friends down the hall added additional language that would make this only be allowable for 1 year for fiscal years 22 and 23. And also that it would not be allowed for any full-time employees or increases in salaries or overtime pay for full-time employees. And in speaking with our agency folks, they are amenable to this. So I would ask for your aye vote.
Any other members on this message? Any other members on this message? Any other members? Seeing none. Members, we are voting on a motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 58. A majority of the elected members is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Clifford, Connolly.
Aye.
Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hunt, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, McGuire, Martinez, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Brown, aye to no. Burkhart, aye to no. Fortner, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 39 aye, 21 no.
By your vote, you've voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 58. Next message for our consideration is message 309, House Bill 73. Chairman Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do move message number 309 to House Bill 73 and ask for your aye vote in concurring with the amendment from the Senate. And I will turn over the explanation of the amendment to the good country lawyer who also dabbles in sugar. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
My apologies, Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The older you get, the more nicknames you acquire. Members, I will ask you to concur with this. It ended up being a very controversial subject all the way around, and what I was trying to do is streamline an administrative process with respect to birth certificates. And that you recall that this body, we put on the 1-year residency requirement, which was a very good amendment to try to get rid of malfeasance or to alleviate some of the concerns around this topic. In the other body, there was a concern regarding the compensation and taking advantage of people in that vein. And I know they had tried a couple amendments which failed, and this amendment on third reading to me is a very good amendment because it limits the compensation to your out-of-pocket expenses. And then the language here, the opportunity costs, such as if the gestational carrier wasn't able to work for a period of time, would be a good example of that. Some may look at this as being much more limiting. It is. It does put a limit. It does get to what the intent of the bill was as I brought it, which was really to help a couple be able to have a child of their own DNA and their own blood. So with that, we can concur with this. I suspect this topic might be brought up in the future. So thank you.
Any other member, first time, Chairman Zwanitzer, on the message to concur?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm going to vote no because I just don't understand, I think, all the unintended consequences. And so if you look through the statute and what we've done in the bill, and now I can't actually figure out why we're talking about notarized agreements, but nowhere in the statute or in this bill do we ever talk about compensation, about financial negotiations. And I would think when you add compensation in, I mean, that's really a contract, right? No longer is this a notarized agreement and the parties are agreeing to certain things. We've added a financial element, which is really weird because we're limiting it to expenses, but we're limiting it to expenses of any other costs. And I don't know, A, how you do that, but then B, I just think it's really weird that we're going to ask somebody who's pregnant to start tracking their costs. So, I mean, I'm never going to be pregnant, but I'm just guessing, and someone can argue with me. If I'm 8 or 9 months pregnant and I'm carrying a child, I'm not going to want to be writing down, here's how much gas costs to the hospital for my maternity check. Here's what I ate today to eat. They wanted me to eat healthy, and during my pregnancy have asked me not to, eat any fast food. Whatever it is, I don't understand why we're adding an accounting element into the statute, into what would otherwise be a private agreement, a private contract, even though we're calling it an agreement. And what I think it does, instead of saying, hey, thank you so much for carrying my child, can, we just agree on a 10,000 or 20,000 or whatever it might be and call it good. We're now throwing a compensation element of I'm going to have you carry my child, and apparently we're going to have a financial arrangement, but someone's going to have to keep track of costs. And I think that is just really unbearable to my mind. And I think it's just really murky, adding compensation and financial stuff into what would otherwise be whatever these agreements are and have been for 30 years now. This takes the bill in a very weird place that I don't think was intended. I understand that it's limiting to what the bringer of the bill wanted to put forth and making sure we have a quick access to the courts for birth certificate changes. But I think we're doing a lot of interesting things, adding a compensation element of tracking finances. And I would personally be appreciative if we have a friendly discussion with our colleagues down the hall to ensure there aren't any unintended consequences and we're not putting weird burdens on pregnant mothers.
Thank you. Any other member, first time, Representative Crago?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the concurrence, I would echo the Chairman of Corporation's comments. I understand what the purpose of the amendment down the hall was intended to do, which is to prevent illegalities. But I think there's some real unintended consequences here, and it's going to prevent people from, the purpose of the bill is to prevent people to be able to have children of their own blood. They will no longer be able to truly, and I believe the way the language is written, compensate somebody for doing that. And so I'm on and against. Thank you.
Member first time, Chairman Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to kind of try to address a few things. Really, this is this is honing in on the scope. So I would say without this language, the transactions that we're talking about could already occur. The statute doesn't prohibit somebody from exchanging money or paying for prenatal care or delivery or lost wages. Statute doesn't prohibit that. So that's kind of the issue in Wyoming, is that we don't have a prohibition on surrogacy in Wyoming. Instead, we just don't have statutes that really carve out what our process is. So now instead we're dealing specifically with birth certificates. But with this amendment, I just want the body to understand that if you voted down, if you didn't have this language, it wouldn't prevent the exchange or a contract, arguably, on any of these services. I'll also say, the way I read this, I don't know that it really does what the body down the hall thinks it does, because I don't know that it can limit, but it depends on how you read it. Yes, we're limited to this category: prenatal care, delivery of the child, and lost wages. Those are the things we're going to allow for reimbursement. But it doesn't say the actual related expenses. It doesn't say that it has to be proved upon receipt or that you have to track all of this. So I think there's a lot of contractual leeway there, depending on how the parties want to write that contract to cover that. And I think the purpose of it, though, is to make sure that somebody who's trying to do the right thing in this scenario isn't left with a bill. And that's really what it's about. So, I don't know that it takes us away from the original bill. But I also just don't know that it really does maybe what the body down the hall thinks it does. I would say on and for this concurrence so that we can move the bill forward to accomplish what the bringer of the bill is trying to accomplish. I don't know that there's much to work out on it, honestly.
Other members for their first time. Other members for their first time. First time, second time, Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Apologize for burning floor time. So the chairman of judiciary said this, and I just want to make this very clear. This bill passes. What it allows are residents of the state of Wyoming for a year to be able to, rather than have to go through the added expense, burden, and time of having the mother adopt her own child. Okay, what it does is allows them to go ahead and have the mother put on the birth certificate. Okay, in law, there's already a process through a series of affidavits allow the father to be put on the birth certificate. So we're balancing that ground there. This language, if we somehow think it's limiting in any way, as what was brought up, okay? So if a couple wants to pay somebody and that's their arrangement that they're going to do, they still can do that. The thing is they're going to have to go back in front of the judge one more time. So that's the limiting factor on here. But if they do this in the more benevolent, as the scenario that I saw situation, they don't have to go back in front of the judge one more time. The mother can just be put on the birth certificate if the requirements are met. Does that make sense? That's all we're doing. So if someone thinks they want to have the opportunity to pay or compensate someone to be a gestational carrier, they still can do it. We're just going to have the court oversight before the final birth certificate's issued. If we do it in a more benevolent situation, like this amendment talks in terms of, then it's a streamlined process, less attorney fees and quicker, and the mother gets on the birth certificate. So concur. Thank you.
Members for their second time, Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know concurrences are a little new to the body, so I do want to mention we can always not concur, have a friendly conversation, and recede from our non-concurrence. But I legitimately think there are questions, and I don't understand really what the other people are thinking and if they understand what they've done. And I just envision this scenario where something goes south, right? You have an agreement. It should be a contract. I haven't got my mind why you have a financial agreement yet, that it basically will be treated like a contract, and something goes wrong. The mother wants to keep the kid. This goes into a court, and she starts now being able to say, well, here's another thing that they didn't quite hit all the buttons and I should be able to keep the child because the agreement's null and void because they didn't do our compensation or accounting correctly. I legitimately just want to go talk to the good people down the hall, make sure this makes sense, run it by a couple more attorneys. And if everything's good, I will bring the recedent from non-concurrence and let it go into law. But I would ask that you vote no and have some of these questions just be answered for this body before we put stuff in the statute.
Thank you. Any other members for their second time? Members for their second time? Second time. Members, we are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 73. Majority of the members elected is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly.
No.
Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 13 aye, 47 no.
By your vote, you voted not to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 73. Next message is 310. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move message 310 and ask for your on concurrence. And I ask for your no vote. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an old friend. This is the CapCon bill. You may recall that we had a conference committee almost on a very identical bill to this last year that there never was. Our good friends down the hall didn't even appoint a committee, but that was their position. And what happened this year is that because of the complaints down the hall of us, of the House having 7 members versus 5 on appropriations, we allowed the Senate to have, to direct this bill. And then when it came to our side, we put in numerous projects and we funded them and we debated them. And so essentially we acquiesced to the Senate so that, and then we modified it here instead of forcing them to take what we normally, because we have a majority vote on appropriations. And so we were just being gentlemen about it, quite frankly. But so when we put all of the projects back in, we put in certain amount of dollars for UW, we put in a certain amount of dollars for community colleges, we put in a certain amount of dollars to finish this Capitol building, we put in money for the territorial prison, and a few other projects, and they simply, in one motion, when it went back over to from the House side to the other side, they just took them all back out. And so we're kind of right back where we started at the beginning of the session. We have been working with our brethren on the JAC on resolutions to this. And so they're expecting this to come back and to go to conference committee. And so I'd ask for your no vote on this concurrence.
Thank you. Discussion on message 310, House Bill 121. Any discussion? Any discussion? So members, we are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 121. A majority of the elected is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart.
No.
Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly.
No.
Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Aye. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stibar. Sweeney. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker.
No.
Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 14 aye, 46 no.
By your vote, you have voted not to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 121. So members, I think we had 3 non-concurrences, so I will appoint those committees here before the end of their day. And then we'll make sure that you have the process in place for initiating those conferences next week on Monday. Mr. Majority Floor Leader. Oh, actually. So members, instead of going into the general file right now, right before lunch, and maybe having a long bill and going into lunch and committee time, we have some enrolled acts to sign. So we'll just get out that kind of stuff. So keep the roar to a dull roar, because this is official business, and I'm going to, we'll sign some enrolled acts, and then we'll recess for lunch, committee meetings, and then we'll come back to work after lunch for committee of the whole. So this is the first of the bills that we've passed on behalf of committees. We're at that order of business, signing of enrolled acts. Chief Reading Clerk will read the enrolled act.
Have to get my script through, sir. Hold on. Mhm.
Reading clerk, please read the enrolled act.
House Enrolled Act 19, being original House Bill 4. An act relating to mental health professions practice act, provided for criminal background checks as specified, providing standards for certification as a certified mental health worker and defining scope of practice, amending reciprocity allowances, repealing obsolete provisions, and providing for the effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign enrolled act number 19, being original House Bill 4. I have so signed. Next enrolled act 20.
House Enrolled Act 20, being original House Bill 20. An act relating to motor vehicles, amending the driver's license requirement to demonstrate visual acuity, requiring rulemaking and providing for effective dates, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign enrolled act 20, being original House Bill 20. I have so signed. Next enrolled act 21.
House Enrolled Act 21, being original House Bill 29, an act relating to indigent person burial expenses, providing for reimbursement of burial expenses for indigent persons, imposing a surcharge for death certificates, creating an account, specifying accountability, and providing for effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign enrolled act number 21, being original House Bill 29. I have so signed. Next enrolled act 22.
House Enrolled Act 22, original House Bill 33, an act relating to crimes and offenses, providing legislative findings, creating criminal offenses related to interference with public contracts, defining terms, specifying penalties, and providing for effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign enrolled act 22, being original House Bill 33. I have so signed. Next enrolled act 23.
House Enrolled Act 23, being original House Bill 46, an act relating to crimes and offenses, creating the crime of bestiality, prohibiting bestiality as specified, providing definitions, providing a penalty, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign enrolled act 23, being original House Bill 46. I have so signed. Congratulations, Representative Stiff. The next enrolled act. Next enrolled act is number 24.
House Enrolled Act 24, being original House Bill 109, an act relating to banking and commerce, specifying how fees authorized by statute may be charged by the state banking commissioner, requiring a report, making conforming amendments, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign enrolled act number 24, being original House Bill 69. I have so signed. Congratulations, Chairman Greer. Next enrolled act is 25.
House Enrolled Act 25, being original House Bill 86, an act relating to motor vehicles, authorizing the licensing and registration of specified off-road vehicles, amending vehicle equipment requirements as specified, amending limitations on the use of specified off-road recreational vehicles on public roadways, making conforming amendments, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign enrolled act number 25, being original House Bill 86. I have so signed. Congratulations, Representative Newman. Next House Bill, or next enrolled act is 26.
House Enrolled Act 26, being original House Bill 87, an act relating to the Provider Recruitment Grant Program, amending the Healthcare Provider Recruitment Grant Program, making a conforming amendment, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 26, being original House Bill 87. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act is 27.
House Enrolled Act 27, being original House Bill 111, an act relating to healthcare prohibiting discrimination in the provision of healthcare services and insurance for organ transplants and related procedures based on a person's disability, providing definitions, providing for enforcement and authorizing a civil action, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 27, being original House Bill 111. I have so signed. Congratulations, Representative Washut. Next Enrolled Act is 28.
House Enrolled Act 28, being original House Bill 118, an act relating to marketing homemade foods, authorizing the sale of eggs as specified, amending provisions to allow for the sale of homemade foods in accordance with the federal exemptions to the maximum extent possible, the providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 28, being original House Bill 118. I have so signed. Congratulations, Representative Duncan. Next Enrolled Act is 29.
House Enrolled Act 29, being original House Bill 130, an act relating to the Hathaway Scholarship Program, authorizing additional courses taken prior to grade 9 to qualify for the Hathaway Success Curriculum, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act 29, being original House Bill 120. I have so signed. Congratulations, Chairman Flitner. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House stand in recess until 2 p.m.
Committee announcements. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 7 will meet immediately in E5 to hear the following, certainly the following bill, Senate File 16 net metering. If time, we may get to Senate File 78 real estate appraisers and Senate File 126 real estate subdivisions.
Chairman Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 4, Education, will meet in E3 in 10 minutes to continue discussing Senate File 68, absenteeism in public schools, and to consider Senate File 130, charter schools.
Thank you. Further announcements? Further announcements? Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your JCC, your Joint Conference Committee, will meet on noon recess to walk through the final draft of the budget, and then your House Appropriations will meet briefly on adjournment to finish up the 2 bills that we're working on this morning.
Further announcements? Further announcements? Members, we are on recess until 2 p.m.